My name is Adam Levitan. Each and every Wednesday, we are here to discuss our rest of season top 150 rankings, how that plays into the season-long trade market, our redraft trade calculator, buy lows, sell highs, and more. I think maybe not that actionable because no one's trading these guys and it doesn't really matter, but I do think it's very interesting who it will be. Who would you take first among the wide receivers? If we were doing a fantasy draft today, who would be your wide receiver one? I think you can make a case for any of the following four guys: Ja'Marr Chase, Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Rashee Rice. I personally have a take, Mark, but I'm curious what you think. We have these guys: JSN 4th, Puka 5th, Chase 6th, and Rashee Rice 8th overall. Oh, and by the way, Amon-Ra and CeeDee Lamb also in the top 10 there as well. So I think it's just a fun conversation. Mark, who would you take first?
Definitely a fun conversation. We have Jackson Smith-Njigba up top right now. I do think that he is the fair wide receiver one right now with the Seahawks past their bye. The level that Sam Darnold has been playing at, the level of target concentration we've seen from JSN in this offense is on par with Ja'Marr Chase and Puka Nacua, but they at least have some wide receiver twos to contend with on their team, where it's pretty much all going through JSN up at the top there. And then when we talk through some of the other names here, Ja'Marr Chase, obviously just a insane target workload with Joe Flacco at quarterback, but Flacco now dealing with a right shoulder injury and is truly 50-50, it looks like, to play in week 9. And that could be right back to Jake Browning. And we saw how that went with Ja'Marr Chase. So kind of, in holding there on Joe Flacco's status the rest of the season. Puka Nacua, given his style of play, I think the highest injury risk of this group is kind of what we deemed on our call last night. And that's the reason to have him second there behind JSN. The Rams also passed their bye. And then Rashee Rice, only a couple games. The Chiefs still do have their bye left to come, and just a lot more mouths to feed, I think, in that offense. We obviously love the Chiefs passing game and how much they throw. And Rashee Rice he almost has an 80% career catch rate. That's just so insane doing the projections each week, how many targets Rashee Rice is converting into catches and getting used around the goal line. So obviously all amazing for wide receivers here. But some nuance into ranking them here. I think I'd take JSN number one right now, just given the certainty around his team and pass their bye as well.
Yeah, it's also close. These guys are all obviously amazing assets. Hopefully you guys were able to acquire Rashee Rice before all this, when we were talking about it for like seemingly months at a time, about trying to acquire Rashee Rice before it was too late. For me, it would be Puka Nacua. I get the injury stuff. That's just really not the way I play fantasy football. I'm just going to assume that Puka Nacua is going to sustain health. And if Puka Nacua does sustain health, I think he will be the best of these guys the rest of the way. He's already had his bye, which I think matters at this point. I know Mark already alluded to that. In the first 5 games of the year, he didn't even have the best matchups. They played Houston, Philly, Indy, and still during those 5 games, 12.4 targets a game, 10.4 catches, 117 yards, scored twice. I mean, he still gets to face the Saints, the 49ers, the Bucks, the Panthers, the Cardinals, and the Lions. So it would be Puka for me. And if I thought Joe Flacco was healthy, I would consider Ja'Marr Chase here as well. I do think there's some like pendulum stuff with this where, 19 targets for Ja'Marr Chase and 2 for T. Higgins is just not the way to win football games. I don't think, and defenses are going to react to that. So yeah, it's interesting, but all these guys are amazing. And I would consider CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra awesome assets to have as well. After that, I think there's a bit of a drop off, but this top of wide receiver rest of season is just so strong. And I'd be thrilled to have, obviously, these guys as the core of my team. All right. Get to some more actionable stuff here, Daigle. I want to shift to running back. And Jack, if you want to sort by running back kind of in the middle here, the middle is where we're seeing the biggest shifts in the rest of season top 150. Part of that comes from injuries. Isaiah Pacheco and Cam Skattebo are both hurt now. Let's start with the Giants situation. Cam Skattebo is going to miss the rest of this season with his dislocated ankle. We have Tyrone Tracy up to 54 overall. I said yesterday on Team by Team, Daigle, I thought what Tyrone Tracy did last year was actually impressive considering the situation. They were way worse than they were last year. And Tyrone Tracy still averaged 4.4 yards per carry, still caught 30-something balls. And I thought that was actually pretty impressive for a round 5 rookie in a horrific situation. It's better now. It's not good, but it's better now. So, and like the way that Tracy scores fantasy points, catching the football, making plays, making bigger plays, like I kind of like it. So we're at 54 overall on Tracy. I think you could make an argument maybe to have him a little bit higher, but what do you think about how Tracy fits here with the rest of these backs?
In the shallower leagues where he was available, definitely the week's top pickup, just because of the longevity we're projecting him for. Recall that, as you mentioned, even last year as a 5th-round rookie, from October on, after the first month of the season, was still entrusted for 71% of the team's backfield touches over Devin Singletary by this same coaching staff. So it's the exact situation, but with significantly better quarterback play, as Jackson Dart has really taken on the toughest part of his schedule and shown that he's still surviving as the QB5 in points per game. Also, when Cam Scatterby was injured in that game, Tracy then went on to out-touch Devin Singletary 8-3. So I just think we have a workhorse here for the rest of the season for as long as Tracy's healthy. So someone I'm definitely willing to just unload the clip on, especially as we move closer towards the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, we have him slightly behind Judkins, slightly behind DeAndre Swift, ahead of Chase Brown, ahead of Omarion Hampton, who we'll get to, ahead of Rico Dowdle. I think it's, a fair range. If the Giants were a better team, I'd be higher on Tracy. Obviously here, I think the role is going to be really good. I think the way he scores fantasy points is really good. It's going to hold him back, obviously, that this team is not the best. Although Jackson Dart continues to put in some impressive performances seemingly on a weekly basis. The other part of this, Jack, is the Kareem Hunt situation. If I was the Chiefs and Isaiah Pacheco were to miss time, and by the way, Isaiah Pacheco, they're calling week to week, meaning I don't think he's going to play in this massive game against the Bills, but we don't have a firm timetable here on him. If you watch the Chiefs play, it's like hard to watch Kareem Hunt try to get any steam going. He just looks so slow out there and plodding, but it is very clear they're obsessed with him at the goal line. I think the risk on Kareem Hunt is that they bring Eli Mitchell off of the practice squad, off of the inactive list or wherever he's been, and give him a bunch of Isaiah Pacheco stuff. That's probably not the most likely scenario, but it's probably what I would do. That said, I have not gotten to see what Eli Mitchell looks like lately. So, Jack, what do you think about Kareem Hunt? We are up to 108 overall on him and 125 overall. Brashard Smith, 107 overall on Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah, last year when Pacheco missed time, it was a ton of Hunt. Kareem Hunt never had under a 67% design carry share in a game Pacheco missed. He averaged 19.4 carries per game while Pacheco was out last year. This year they have a little more competition with Brashard Smith, and like you said, maybe they get Eli Mitchell involved. He's been inactive every game so far this year as the clear RB4. But now he's going to be active. We'll see what his role looks like. But I do think it's fair to question what the rest of season value is if Pacheco truly is week to week with the sprained MCL. They have, like you said, the huge game this week against Buffalo on the road that could end up deciding the 1 seed in the AFC. And then they have a bye week. If he's week to week, Pacheco could only miss one game. And if he's not on injured reserve, so he's probably going to be back with it before 4 games. So he could only be out 1 or 2 games. And if Kareem Hunt is the 60% of the Chiefs' backfield for 1 or 2 games, that's good for 1 or 2 games, but it's not super valuable rest of the season because once Pacheco's back, he's going to go back to the same kind of goal line, short yardage only role that he was in before.
Yeah. I just don't think it's that valuable role, period. I never thought Pacheco's role was all that valuable either. He doesn't play really on clear pass downs, and he doesn't really play around the goal line. Kareem Hunt did. So, removing these Isaiah Pacheco carries doesn't really matter that much to me. I don't think they're worth that much. Well, it's not like Kareem Hunt's going to get a carry from his own 30 and go for a touchdown. It's never going to happen. Go ahead, Daigle.
I think Kareem Hunt becomes more usable in the interim as an RB3 flex. But more importantly, I also think it gives Brashard Smith a couple more outs in a short showcase stint, especially this upcoming game against one of the league's worst rush defenses in the Bills. Brashard Smith's actually been terrible at carrying the ball so far. He doesn't have a single 10-yard run. He's broken 1 missed tackle all year long. The thing is, though, the Bills are allowing the fourth highest rate of explosive carries. And so if we are going to pin in even a handful of more carries for Smith, this is the game where he can succeed based on the defense alone. So I do think there's at least a chance for him to earn a larger role. Not that he will, but I think that's definitely worth, like, wherever he's available, stashing him. Maybe if you're desperate because their 4 teams are bye, even starting him, just because it can happen in this game.
Yeah. I mean, they have not given him much of a chance in base, but maybe this is a chance to give Brashard Smith a chance in base, you know, and to Daigle's point. So, yeah, I think I would definitely want to have Brashard Smith on my bench here as well. Mark, let's go to Chase Brown. Let's assume for now that Joe Flacco's shoulder is healthy. I'm still, like, obviously it's been way better for Chase Brown on the efficiency stuff. I'm sitting there, I'm watching the Bengals. I obviously have a ton of Chase Brown. It's like second and goal from the 8 or something, and Samaje Perine gets the carry. I'm like, man, I can't have this, right? And so I think having Chase Brown here below Tyrone Tracy makes sense, especially if you layer in the Joe Flacco risk. Obviously, Chase Brown and this offense was absolutely miserable with Jake Browning. But Mark, let's assume Flacco is healthy for now. Where are you at on Chase Brown?
It's just really interesting to me that they are using Samaje Perine as much as they are the last month. So the last 4 games, it's pretty much been a 55-45 split in favor of Chase Brown. So really close. It's not even like he's getting like the 65-35 split here. And the roles have been pretty interchangeable in terms of like who's playing on pass downs, who's playing on early downs. So we don't even have, I think, a situation where like if the Bengals were to build a lead in a big game or a big lead in a game, that they would lean on Chase Brown even heavier. So, I think Chase Brown is certainly in the RB2 conversation right now, but we have this huge cluster of running backs that are all in timeshares and committees. And I think Chase Brown is just kind of subject to that role right now. It's also been, I think, a little underwhelming in terms of how much Joe Flacco has targeted the running back position since getting to Cincinnati. I thought that would probably improve, and it hasn't necessarily. Obviously, when Jamar Chase is taking like 60% of the targets, or whatever absurd number he is at right now, then that leaves not as many targets available for the backs. But yeah, Chase Brown, I think, just a committee back right now in this big cluster of committee backs that we see across the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have him that much clear of Jaylen Warren, which I think is like kind of a fairish comparison there. I think a lot of this is going to come down to matchups. Obviously, Flacco's health, but a lot's going to come down to matchups also. Upcoming matchups for the Bengals, home against the Bears. I think that's a pretty good spot. Steelers, we know, is a pretty good spot. Patriots, Ravens, Bills, Ravens again. But then in the fantasy playoffs, week 16, Dolphins, week 17, Cardinals. So like if you get Flacco there for those 2 playoff games, I think those are pretty decent spots for Chase Brown. Obviously, we have a long way to go until then. One more Daigle on the middle of the running back tier here is Rico Dowdle. So after we spent considerable amount of time, and I got into an argument on Twitter, which I never do. Got into arguments on Twitter about this. Now the Panthers are like, I don't know. You don't have to do this, man. Like, Dave Canales, if you're listening to this show, you don't have to come out and just be like, yeah, you know what? You guys were right. We got to play Rico. Like, just say you're going hot hand, and Rico has the hot hand. Clearly. You don't have to say, yeah, you know what? You guys were right. Rico's better. We were idiots. We paid Chuba Hubbard all this money, But whatever. Do you believe this, Daigle, the latest comments from Canales that they are going to full Rico? Well, maybe not full Rico, to some version of Rico being the lead back here. And if you do believe it, what do you think about Rico versus Chuba, and Rico and Chuba rest of season?
I do believe it, if only because they talked about Chuba Hubbard as if he passed away. Like they were like, thoughts and prayers to Chuba. Thank you for everything you did for this organization. But even the announcers had mentioned on that game Sunday that the Bills had, quote, shored up their run defense. They only got Chuba Hubbard carries. Like when Rico Dowdle had the ball against the Bills, he averaged 6.8 yards per carry. He was still super explosive. Chuba, since he's come back, has averaged under 3 yards per carry in both games. So it's really the change that is necessary in order for the team to win, since right now it is detrimental to your offense to give Chuba the ball at all. I do think they're going to move forward with Dowdle now because he's still been so good in a timeshare, and so much so that I moved Hubbard into the one injury away list at the top tier as a contingency stash and a player I do believe you can now drop for a better stash option moving forward.
Yeah. By the way, a lot of people, every time I tweet something about Rico Dowdle, they're like, his big games were against the Dolphins and the Cowboys, you idiot. It failed. And that analysis, if I even call that analysis, fails to realize that Rico Dowdle down the stretch last year smashed the Eagles while he was with the Cowboys for 104 yards. Smashed the Panthers for 149. Bengals for 131. Giants for 112. Commanders for 72 and a touchdown. So we have a bigger sample than I think people realize of him playing down the stretch for the Cowboys last year and actually looking like a really good running back. NFL did not agree. Cowboys let him walk. Panthers got him for nothing, but yeah, guy just continues to produce.
There was a lot of people in that organization too that felt he was the best running back all year long last year. But they brought Zeke back, who then eventually got kicked off the team because he was sleeping through practices and just enjoying that last year contract. So the Cowboys are just run differently. Ignore everything that happened with Rico last year.
Yeah, and I mean, these running backs here, in this range, Rico, Chase Brown, Jalen Warren, JCM, who, is obviously going to be pretty game script and big play dependent. All these guys aren't like the most confident of starts on a weekly basis, but these are like the RB2s that I think make a difference. Like, get us through, get us 10 points, get us 12 points, and see what we can get from there. That's kind of the state of where we're at in this back end of the RB2s here.
I will say on the Panthers running back spot too, I do think Rico is going to take over the lion's share of the rushing work, but they have heavily leaned into Chuba Hubbard as the receiving back like early on in the season, and he's ran more routes than Rico each week. So I don't think Chuba is going to be like completely iced. I do think they'll probably still mix him in on some pass downs. So it's not like Rico jumps right into an RB1 workload. I do think it'll still be a little bit split even in that regard.
All right. This show is brought to you by our friends at DraftKings. The NFL season is indeed here, and there's no better way to get closer to the action than with the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app, the ultimate destination for football fans. Right now, our partners at DK are giving new customers a chance to play free for their share of millions in prizes with their first deposit on the app. Download DraftKings and enter promo code ETR or scan the QR code to play free for your share of millions with your first deposit. That's for new DK customers. Just download the Daily Fantasy app for your free shot today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-7897-777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. Minimum $5 deposit required. One single-use $3 ticket rewarded. Ticket rewards are site credits valid for use on eligible DraftKings contests. Ticket rewards expire 14 days after being issued. Ends on December 31st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. See terms at DraftKings.com/promotions. Sponsored by DraftKings. All right. Jack, let's go to Chargers mess. I want to get to running back, but first let us start with wide receiver, because a lot of people were under the impression that they had the nuts. They thought they were the smartest person in the history of the world. I drafted Quentin Johnston in the 15th round while all you slappies were taking rookies. And look what I got. One of the best wide receivers in fantasy. Lately, all we've seen, ever since he got back from this hamstring injury and Oronde Gadsden has broken out, all we've seen from Quentin Johnston is like, go routes, run down the field. And that's obviously the way Quentin Johnston's been used previously. And not the best thing for him in fantasy, and it's shown up in the results. So we're back down to 66 now on Quentin Johnston. Jack, how worried are you about him rest of season?
Yeah, I don't think it's completely over for Quentin Johnston. He's still on the field a ton, and this is still an offense that's going to throw the ball a lot and throw it effectively. But I do think that at the beginning of the year, the Chargers were throwing the ball to their wide receivers 80+% of the time. Now, with Gadsden really breaking out, that's not going to be the case. And Ladd McConkey is also kind of returned to the target earning that he showed. as a rookie, and the past couple of weeks since Johnston's been back, he's had 11% target share, and in this past game on Thursday, he had a 0% target share. And I do think that the days of him being a 20+% target share guy like he was in September is over with Gadsden breaking out and McConkey coming on. And Mark mentioned while we were doing these rankings yesterday that the broadcast on Thursday mentioned that the Chargers really value Trey Harris as a blocker. So in positive game script, like we saw on Thursday, Keenan Allen ran 25% routes and Johnston ran 74% routes. That 74% number was tied for his lowest of the season in a healthy game, and Keenan Allen's 25% was easily his lowest so far this season. So I do think that Harris is pushing Johnston and Keenan Allen a little bit more because of his blocking ability than we saw early in the season, and the breakout of Gadsden is just cutting down on the targets for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, it's crowded, man, and they've been throwing less. So, like, they're still, like, kind of neutral, but over the last 4 weeks, they are, like, middle of the pack. The Chargers are in pass rate over expectations. So the pie is smaller, and it's being split in more ways when Gadsden is catching these balls. And I actually think Kamani Vidal plays reasonably well in the pass game as well. We saw Keenan Allen get down to just 17 routes, as Jack mentioned in that game on Thursday. Trey Harris, 11. I just kind of think, like, in the end, talent's going to win out, and Ladd McConkey's a better football player than Quentin Johnston by a lot. And if you're going to ask someone to just run down the field and be the clear-out guy, it's more likely to be Quentin Johnston. Now, people are in full-blown panic, right? I think we're still going to be higher than what a lot of the market thinks here at 66 overall. People are just like, I'm done with QJ. He's back to his old ways. If someone dropped him, I would pick Quentin Johnston back up, but I don't know that I'd be, like, trying to buy him necessarily unless it was really, really cheap. Because just, just like on talent takes, Ladd's better. Gadsden stuff, I think, is real.
Especially after Gadsden just hit a season high route participation, basically to be on the field for nearly every single drop back, ran more routes from the slot over Keenan Allen because of it. It just seems like they found him as a receiving tight end. They can also use a receiver, which, as you said, makes the target tree larger. But I do think it's still quietly dwindling down to solely Ladd McConkey and Gadsden consistently, with the others sprinkled in for their roles. Trey Harris blocking, Keenan Allen on third down.
Yeah. Like, you could say, well, tight end's a different position. It doesn't really affect the rest of these guys, but they're not really using Gadsden as a traditional tight end. He's like a pass-catching tight end, period, and so it does make a big difference. We're up to 72 overall here on Gadsden. The other part of this, Mark, is this Omarion Hampton stuff. I mean, God, that first report when he got hurt, that was like, he'll be back relatively soon. Oh, and then it was like, he'll be back right after these 4 weeks is up when he went on IR. And now it's like, the dude's still in a boot. I mean, they showed him at the game, or somebody saw him at the game on Thursday, still in a boot. And now we have the Twitter docs saying it might not be until week 13 or so that we see Omarion Hampton back on the field. So this is a really hard one in rest of season rankings. We're at 59 on Hampton, 78 on Kamani Vidal. When you are out for 2 months it's going to be, maybe, by the time he gets back, teams don't typically just throw you back in after 2 months of a foot or ankle injury and just give you the full workload back. So, and Vidal's played well. So, Mark, what do you think about Chargers backfield rest of season?
It's certainly tricky, and we talked about the uncertainty on last week's rest season pod as well, and we haven't gotten any clarity in the time being, sadly. I do think, like, it's probably fair to assume that he is going to be out through the week 12 bye, considering he's still in a boot, and at that point it would be a solid 2 months removed from when he got injured. So we might be a little bit high on him at RB19 for the rest of the season if that is the case, but still, again, dealing with some uncertainty here. And then when you look at our rank on Kamani Vidal, I think you can assume he's the lead back from weeks 9 to 11, right? So you get 3 more games of him being an RB2. And then at that point, I do think Omarion Hampton, despite the long layoff, will be back in the RB1 role, which puts Vidal as the backup / kind of handcuff territory. And so then he'd be towards the bottom of the top 150 rank. So I think we have him in a decent middle ground here at 78th. Overall RB31, like he's an RB2 the next 3 weeks, and then after that, I think Kamani Vidal will be back to the RB1 role, Omarion Hampton will be. And even if Hampton doesn't have like a 60 or a 70-30 split in his first game back. I do think by the fantasy playoffs, week 15, that he will get there. Just want to remind everyone that, Kamani Vidal was on the practice squad for the first 3-4 weeks of the season, did not see the field at all. So I do think they'll confidently go back to Omarion Hampton. But certainly a lot of speculation and just around the injury timeline, what the workload will be. It's a tough spot, no doubt.
Yeah, it's really tough. I do have Kamani Vidal in a league, and like, I'm not getting rid of him. Maybe he'll turn to and be a total dust in the fantasy playoffs for me, but like, Omarion Hampton's been out too long. There's too many questions around his injury. He's still in the boot. Like, I'm not going to give away Kamani Vidal at this point. Daigle, let's go to some wide receiver situations now that are messy. Start with Green Bay. Christian Watson came back and played more, honestly, than I thought that he would play. He played 60-something% of the snaps, caught all of his targets, seemed to come out of the game fine. We have him 93 in rest of season, top 150. Romeo Doubs, 94. Matthew Golden, 124. The thing about this is Jayden Reed is going to be back sometime. Week 10, week 11, week 12, I think is sometime reasonable for Jayden Reed. Maybe week 13, but that would surprise me a little bit. Dontavian Wicks has also run a bunch of routes for this team. He was out of this game with a calf injury. Tucker Kraft is breaking out. And we've seen this team go really run heavy. So you're going to get a lot of people telling you, Daigle, why even have these guys ranked? I can't even start these guys in season long. I don't know which one's going to go off on in a given week. The target tree is going to be incredibly flat on a week-to-week basis. I can't pinpoint who I want to play among Packers wide receivers. So, Daigle, what do you think about Watson and any other Packers wide receiver thoughts rest of season?
For the people that suggest they want to be run heavy, I would say in the matchups column this past week, I even wrote that in the 3 games, but now 4 games after Sunday night, that they've had their entire starting offensive line, Zach Tom and Aaron Banks included, they've had a positive pass rate over expectation in all 4 of those games, including a season high rate on Sunday night. I think they want to be a drop back team with everyone at full strength. And if that's the case, as I wrote in the waiver wire column, I would outright drop Matthew Golden right now for Christian Watson. Golden had an entire month without Jayden Reed and Dontavian Wicks at times. And still to this point, go back to college, 3 seasons, didn't earn a 16% target share in any year, and now in the NFL hasn't reached a 20% target share in any game. Whereas Watson shows up, as you mentioned, shockingly ran around on 66% of dropbacks in his first game and just out-targets Golden with ease. So I want Watson wherever he's available right now, just understanding that his usage can grow further. And in the past, when he's been healthy, that's a big if, I know, for the rest of the year, but when he's been healthy, he has emerged as their wide receiver 1 over Jayden Reed. So that's a bet I'm willing to make right now.
Okay. Yeah. And all that's totally fair for sure. I would say Matthew Golden is like the archetype of fantasy player that I don't love dropping this time of year. First round rookie, a lot of talent, has underperformed, has good quarterback play. But like, we see these guys break out late in the year. I think it's unlikely to happen because of what I said about the Packers being so flat and playing 5 wide receivers. So I'm okay with it if you want to drop Golden. I'm trying not to. I agree with Daigle, though. I'd rather have Christian Watson. Like, we actually have documented success of Christian Watson at the NFL level that we do not really have on Matthew Golden. But yeah, I think all 3 of these guys, the guys we have on the screen right now, I think they're all tough clicks to start in your fantasy league. But there's plenty of people in 12, 14 team leagues where they'd be dying to start Christian Watson for sure. Another mess, Jack, is this San Francisco wide receiver situation. Silva and I talked yesterday about this Ricky Pearsall stuff. These PCL injuries, man, like, this is what the Kyle Pitts excuse makers all have. They're like, oh, but Adam, he was terrible because he had a PCL for 2 years or whatever, So this stuff can certainly linger. It's scary on Ricky Pearsall. I don't really know what to expect. Also mentioned to Silva yesterday, there is starting to be more and more Brandon Ayuk buzz. He's not going to be activated this week, but maybe next week they open up his 21-day window. And to me, Brandon Ayuk, just on raw talent, blows Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Kendrick Bourne out of the water. And so I might have Brandon Ayuk ranked at this point just as like a stash over Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne's kind of had his chance, flubbed it the last 2 weeks at least. But yeah, it's tough with the Pearsall injury. Jack, what do you think about 49ers wide receivers rest of season?
Yeah, it's a lot of guesswork because we don't really know when Pearsall will be back. We don't know exactly when Ayuk will be back, and when Ayuk's back, I think the bigger question is how healthy is he actually, just because it's been such a long road. I do think in leagues with deep benches, it's fine to stash Ayuk just because he is the most talented wide receiver on the roster. So in the event that he actually is healthy, there is some upside there. We've seen Juwan Jennings get back to big target shares the last couple of games. In week 7, he had a 27% target share. This past week, he had a 21% target share. The efficiency has not been there. He's at 5.9 yards per target. We know he's playing through broken ribs. In theory, that should get better, and maybe the efficiency rises as he gets healthier. But so far, we have not seen the efficiency. But I still think it bodes well that the volume has come back, and he has, at the very least, reasserted himself as the wide receiver 1 over Kendrick Bourne. And that's why we moved Juwan Jennings up this week. We also don't know when Purdy's going to be back. It sounds like it could be this week, could be the following week. The 49ers defense, though, is a complete disaster right now. Since Fred Warner got hurt, they're in the bottom quartile of the league in EPA per play and success rate and all those stats. And they suffered more injuries this past week. So I really think the 49ers, once Purdy gets back, could be kind of a quiet team that has to get into shootouts, and that bodes well for all of their receivers. But Pearsall and Ayuk, I think, are the more exciting options here with Juwan's inefficiency. And we don't totally know how healthy they are.
I do want to note that it's all relative. And so these past 2 games, although it does not look like their receivers, Juwan Jennings, Kendrick Bourne, has been efficient, Mac Jones has only passed for 150 and 190 yards the last 2 weeks because they've played the best of the best in the Falcons and the Texans. The Giants, as they've proven, are not that. And so it's now an easier matchup with Jennings presumably back at full health because he is, like Jack said, earning targets at an elite level again. So I do think it could be a situation where they all just pop off now this week.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I will say that I think Jack's point about 49ers defense is like really well taken. They could be bad. I mean, CJ Stroud has been tough for like 2 years, and he went out there without Nico Collins and Christian Kirk and shredded this 49ers defense. And
Didn't take a sack.
Didn't take a sack. I mean, their defense could be bad the rest of the way here, the 49ers. So, and I think that'd be good. You know, like Jack said, I think that'd be good for 49ers pass catchers here. Mark, let's go to one more wide receiver situation here, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We've spent a lot of time on the Bucs. I do think it's important to get right because Bucs stuff is important. They have such a good passing offense when it is clicking, and they have a pretty good rest of season schedule. Obviously, they get good weather games when a lot of other teams aren't. We saw them kind of limp into the bye. No Mike Evans. Chris Godwin's been out a while. Bucky's been out a while. Egbuka did not look like himself in the last 2 games here. We still are at 17 overall on Egbuka, and I think a lot of people are going to say that's too high on a guy, given we don't have a huge sample of him playing at elite level at the NFL level. But man, when you remove Mike Evans, there's a lot of meat on the bone here if Emeka Egbuka can get his hamstring right and be really good. So Mark, what do you think about Bucs wide receiver rest of season?
Yeah, the short-term memory in the fantasy community is quite astounding sometimes. I think, Emeka Egbuka right now still the wide receiver 6 in total points, wide receiver 10 in points per game right now in half PPR, and he's an opportunity is there as well. He's wide receiver 13 in our expected fantasy points per game model among wide receivers. And so now the Bucs go into the bye. You expect Emeka Egbuka to be pretty close to 100% healthy following that bye from the hamstring. He's obviously played the last 2 games. So I think that's a fair assumption to make. And then, yeah, I think, Mike Evans with that broken collarbone is expected to miss all of the fantasy, regular season and playoffs most likely. Chris Godwin still has not practiced at all since, he played 2 games and then re-injured that fibula. And I just have no expectations of him really coming back to contribute here. And so I think Emeka Egbuka is an easy wide receiver 1 the rest of the way in fantasy leagues. I would be buying. We've talked about, the Bucs soft schedule the rest of the season, their great fantasy playoffs schedule as well there. Just a reminder, again, they get the Falcons, Panthers, and Dolphins in the fantasy playoffs. Leading up, they also get, the Saints again, the Cardinals, the Rams. So a lot of games here that the Bucs are going to have to lean on the pass, and I think Emeka Egbuka is the clear leader there. So yeah, I love Egbuka as a buy low if people are worried about the last couple games here.
Yeah, and on his hamstring health, like maybe he wasn't 100%, right? Maybe he was 85 or 90, but the fact that they let him play and he played the whole game suggests to me that after the bye, he will actually be 100%. So yeah, I think it's an interesting time to buy Egbuka if you can stomach the bye week here. I think it's an interesting one. Daigle, this Bucky Irving situation. I mean, I did him as a buy, I think maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. One of my moves was buy Bucky Irving. I assumed by this point we'd have some more info. We don't really have any more info, but we are sticking with him up here at 39 overall. I don't really know how you'd answer this without knowing about the injury, but any thoughts on Bucky versus Rashad rest of season?
The only way to answer it without literally any firm reports, nothing coming out from the team, from other reporters about whether Bucky will actually be healthy and back after their bye, since he's been ruled out basically 6 days before kickoff in every game so far. The only way to handle it is to, one, not drop Rachaad White wherever you have him, just because we don't know, and two, also pick up Sean Tucker, because the coaching staff even mentioned they want to involve Tucker more prior to this past game, and that's exactly what happened with Tucker handling 12 carries to Rachaad White's 13. So if Bucky's not back, I would imagine it would be a 60-40 split in favor of White moving forward.
Dude, do not watch Rachaad White's goal line carries from week 8. He looked like a grandma, like tiptoeing into the line 4 straight times. Couldn't get in from 1 yard. It was just like, God, that was unreal. And then, deservedly so, they went to Sean Tucker in goal line situations in the second half. So, yeah, I mean, if Bucky's going to keep missing more time, the Rachaad role, I feel like, is getting not ideal. All right. Oh, quickly, I just want to touch on the trade deadline stuff. We talked about a lot of it last week. Last week on in the trade deadline segment, we talked about Jacoby Myers. I still think he's the likeliest one to move before the deadline on Tuesday. Steelers, Bills, Patriots, Broncos. We talked about Olave last week. Still think he's more likely to get an extension than get traded. One that we didn't hit last week was Rashid Shaheed. I still think he'd look really good on the Bills. And I know a lot of people out there are like, man, Rashid Shaheed's a good player. Why would the Saints trade him? I mean, he's not that young, and his contract's up after this year. Is Shaheed going to be there when this team, or if this team ever gets good? So I wouldn't kill the Saints for trading Shaheed. Again, I think he'd look really good on the Bills. The other Saints thing that we have going on, Daigle, is the Tyler Shuck stuff. So on Shaheed, Daigle, how are you thinking about him if you have him right now? I said yesterday I thought Shuck was like, well, I think it's going to be like roughly even with Rattler for the outlook on Olave and Shaheed. But I don't hold that opinion like very firmly. Daigle, what do you think about Shaheed with the Shuck move and the trade rumors?
Anything could happen with Shuck, but I do think it's a tough run out in his first game. Rams coming back fully healthy after their bye. Now we have Jared Verse and a defense that creates pressure at a top 10 rate, and even off the bench. And this was Shuck's red flag in college too. But even coming off the bench, he went 1 of 7 for 6 yards under pressure in that game. So I'm worried about the short-term outlook for Shuck. Having said that, Shaheed, yeah, we'll see who he favors here. Juwan Johnson has also popped back up, as we talked about last week, since Alvin Kamara has had no choice but to move back into an early down carry role until or unless they get Devin Neal involved. So I'm holding like a Quentin Johnston. I'm definitely holding Shaheed wherever I had him and waiting it out. But I don't think it's a situation, even with 4 teams on bye, where you have to start him this week.
Okay, Jack, the other guy that's going to come up a lot in trade rumors is Breece Hall. I just don't think they're going to get a lot for Breece Hall, and so if you can only get a 5th round pick or something, are the Jets going to do that? I'm growing like more skeptical. So my base case right now is that Breece Hall does stay on the Jets. I think if you offer the Jets a round 3 pick, maybe a round 4 pick, they might do it, but I don't know that someone's going to offer that for a running back on an expiring contract like Breece Hall is. Now, if you wanted to sell Breece Hall, Jack, I don't want to spoil anyone's move to make. I hope no one is doing this, but if you want to sell Breece Hall, now would be the time after he just eviscerated the lifeless Bengals defense. So, Jack, what do you think about handling Breece Hall heading into this trade deadline?
Yeah, I think we predict trades happening more than they
Yeah.
actually happen a lot of the time. So I think it's most likely that Brees is going to stay put. I don't mind adding Isaiah Davis. Just seeing, we've got one more week. You can see if Brees Hall gets traded, and if he does, you've got a fringe fantasy starter all of a sudden in Isaiah Davis, and if not, no harm done. I don't mind selling Brees, assuming that he's going to be on this Jets team the rest of the season. But it's still a fine role. It's not like he's worthless on the Jets. It's still a pretty solid fantasy starter, even if he does stay.
Well, and even in that game against the Bengals, I know they got a lot of running back touches and a lot of plays off, but Isaiah Davis played a ton in that game. You know, it wasn't like Brees got 80% of the snaps and 90% of the running back touches or anything like that. And then the Jets, after they played the Bengals, their next game after the bye is against the Browns, and then at New England, at the Ravens. They do have a good fantasy playoff schedule, but these next 3 games, Browns, Patriots, Ravens, and then you also have a bye. So like for the next month, I don't know how pretty it's going to be for Breece Hall. I would just be sick if I traded him and then like I woke up to some tweet from Schefter like Breece Hall traded to Chiefs or something. You know, I'd have to like off myself, you know, and like, so I don't think that's very likely though. So I think the base case is that Breece Hall stays with the Jets. And in that case, I'm kind of interested in selling, but I keep looking at this fantasy playoff schedule. He plays the Jags, Saints, Patriots in the fantasy playoffs. He gets a game against the Dolphins there in week 14 too. So yeah. All right. Let's get to some listener questions. Appreciate everyone who submitted them. Mark Abogovich says, is Chris Olave a sell high with the quarterback change? Jack, if you want to flip over to all New Orleans stuff that we have here. So the quarterback change is going to freak people out a little bit on a lot of these guys. I will say, Tyler Shuck got off 30 pass attempts in the second half of that game alone. And this is how Chris Olave is winning. He is second in the entire NFL in targets. I don't know why that would change. The efficiency might not be great, but I don't see why he wouldn't continue to get 8, 9, 12 targets a game. So what do you think about selling high on Olave? Ask Abogovich, Mark.
It's tough. We've gotten this question a few times, and I was like, well, the questions that we had entering Chris Olave entering the season, have been answered, and Rattler's been more than competent. And I don't know what to think about Tyler Shuck. I tend to agree with you, Adam. I think it's probably more of a lateral move. I don't think it's going to be like a huge benefit to Chris Olave necessarily, but just given the way these games are playing out with the Saints, as they continue to have a porous defense, they continue to run a fast offense under Kellen Moore and getting a lot of plays off. Chris Olave is wide receiver 6 currently and expected fantasy points per game in PPR and hasn't been even underperforming by all that much. So, we knew Rattler would push the ball down the field, and he did that a little bit more the last few games with Olave, which was nice to see. So I think just kind of holding Olave at this point is what I would prefer rather than selling high. But again, it's always, it's always fine to test the trade market. And if people are, I still think Olave, we have him as wide receiver 20. I think that's pretty fair. But, if people are valuing him higher, sure, test the market. But I think I'd hold Olave right now.
Yeah. I mean, like, I respect that the Shuck haters, right? And the best case the Shuck haters have is that he went to training camp. I assume the Saints wanted him to win the job, and he couldn't do it. He lost out to Spencer Rattler. That's a huge data point that is real scary on Tyler Shuck. But coming out of college, there's no doubt that Tyler Shuck was a better prospect than Spencer Rattler. I mean, Spencer Rattler didn't go until the 5th freaking round. They took Tyler Shuck 40th overall at age 26. So I do think there's like some of the uncertainty on Tyler Shuck favors Chris Olave. Like, yeah, he's probably just as bad as Spencer Rattler, but maybe there's like a 10% chance that he's actually decently better and moves the needle for Chris Olave. So yeah, we'll see. Daigle Mitch asks, what are your thoughts on RJ Harvey going full rookie year David Johnson and crushing down the stretch after showing plus efficiency with limited touches until now? So we can always go back and pick off some guys that turned out to be superstars that started off with high efficiency and low touches. We've seen that a lot. I think the RJ Harvey problem has been J.K. Dobbins has been pretty decent here as well. We are at 71 overall on Dobbins, 90 overall on Harvey. Daigle, what do you think about Mitch's question here? RJ Harvey breakout down the stretch.
I'm hoping the 3 touchdowns out of nowhere, by the way, got him more usage moving forward. But the role didn't change at all. 31% of the team's backfield touches. Maybe this makes them want to involve him more on the goal line, but the Broncos have also benefited from a really easy schedule against the Giants and Cowboys the past 2 weeks. This is what happens in the fantasy space. We always come out of Cowboy games the next week much higher on offenses. There's a reason for that, by the way. So I don't think my opinion on Harvey has changed at all. He's someone where, like in a 14-team league, you may be forced to start him. I definitely don't want to drop him. I want to have him on the end of every bench, even in 10 and 12-team leagues. But my confidence hasn't moved in either direction.
I mean, he's one injury away from an awesome role. And J.K. Dobbins has been one of the more injury-prone backs in the NFL. One thing about the Dobbins stuff, like I said, Dobbins has been good. I should note they've played the Titans already. They've played the Bengals already. They've played the Jets already. They've played the Giants already. They've played the Cowboys already. They have had probably the best running back schedule out of anyone. Now they have to play the Texans this week. They have a game against the Chiefs coming up. They have a game against the Packers. In Fantasy Championship week 17, they play at the Chiefs. And obviously you expect them to be a pretty decent dog there in that game, which is not great for J.K. Dobbins, who has not really been playing on passing downs. So if you want to sell Dobbins right now, I think it's an interesting time to do it. I'm not sure exactly what you could get, but we have him 71 overall. RJ Harvey 90th. I think that makes sense. All right, let's see. Oh God, Jay asks, are you still holding Luther Burden for potential late season contributions? Usage hasn't really increased post-bye. Now a concussion, and Caleb might not be good. Yeah, Jack, if you want to flip over to Chicago ranks, I mean, it's hard to see it on Luther Burden right now. I will note that Olamide Zaccheaus popped up in the injury report this week, and so maybe there's an opening here. But Luther Burden's on the injury report also with a concussion, and we have Caleb playing really bad. Now, they play the Bengals this week, man. And, like, if you told me Zaccheaus was out, Burden was in, and they were playing the Bengals, I'd be like, oh, that's pretty interesting, man. But I don't know if that's how it's going to run out. So, Jack, what do you think about dropping or holding Luther Burden here?
I think I'd try to give it one more week. I know there's a lot of people who can't, and they need someone who could produce more this week. I think it's fine to drop him, but if you have the space, I'd prefer to hold. He's probably going to miss this week with a concussion. Most of the concussion guys, I think everyone besides Marvin Harrison so far has missed at least a week with a concussion. Zaccheaus is on the injury report with a knee injury. We don't really know what that is right now. Maybe he's out multiple weeks, and maybe we get a week of Burden without Zaccheaus. The trade deadline is also next week, and I just said that we predict trades a lot more than they actually happen, but there have been crazier things than DJ Moore getting dealt with in the next week. So I'd probably prefer to wait at least until the weekend and find out with Zaccheaus and see if DJ Moore survives the trade deadline. I assume he will, but there's always a chance.
Yeah.
But after that, if he's still wide receiver 4 in a week or two, it's probably okay to cut ties.
Yeah. Well, this team is leading into the run, and Caleb has been really bad. Now, a lot of Caleb's numbers are going to look better after this week because they're playing the Bengals, right? So he's not going to rank like dead last in all these metrics, assuming that he comes out and shreds the Bengals, which I think that he will. But if he doesn't, that would be like, oh my God, Caleb couldn't even shred the Bengals. Like that would be a scary sign, and you're not going to be able to do much with Bengals pass catchers at that point.
I would let the entire injury report shake itself out since Cole Kmet was also injured last game. We don't worry about Wednesday too much, but Rome Odunze was a DNP on Wednesday too. So let's just see who's available for the Bears in a very soft spot against Cincinnati and go from there.
All right. Let's get to some trades that the people submitted here as quickly as we can. Jack, if you want to bring up our redraft trade calculator, which if you have DraftKit, you have access to, shout out to us. MLB now says, what about buying Rico Dowdle? Should I trade Dowdle on one side here, Jack? I'm sorry. Dowdle and Stafford on one side, Worthy on the other side. And Mark, he says that his quarterbacks are Caleb and Fields. He also has Chase Brown, Vidal, Hampton, and Tootin. At wide receiver, he has Egbuka, Rice, Lamb, J-Mo, and Downs. Sounds like he's got a pretty good team here, Mark. We do have the Rico Stafford side slightly ahead. Thoughts on this trade?
He says his wide receivers are Egbuka, Rashee Rice, and CeeDee Lamb. So I think Xavier Worthy pretty expendable here for him. And then, yeah, I think trading for Rico Dowdle is solid. You also get some more assurance at quarterback in Matthew Stafford there. I think you can feel pretty confident starting him, whereas we don't really know how the rest of the season is going to go for Justin Fields. We mentioned the Caleb Williams matchup against the Bengals is really strong this week, but rest of the season, I don't think it's crazy to necessarily prefer Stafford long term. So I would probably pull off this trade given the strength of his wide receiver room.
Let's go to Dave Olson. He says, I'm in first place, Daigle. Shout out to Dave Olson. He says, I need running back help / depth. Should I send Jalen Waddle to receive Tyrone Tracy? His running backs are JT and God. JT and Barkley's a nice start, man. JT, Barkley, Mason, and Bam Knight. His wide receivers are JSN, Waddle, Flowers, Worthy, Shaheed, and Jacoby. Yeah, nice team there, Dave Olson. Not surprised you are in first place. We do have Waddle pretty decently ahead here, Daigle. However, you understand what he's saying. He needs some depth. He doesn't have much behind JT and Barkley. Thoughts on this one?
I think this team personally needs Waddle more because you only have JSN and Flowers. Xavier Worthy you can plug in, but Waddle we even got pushback last week on our rest of season ranking on Waddle, just talking about the potential detriment and the falling apart of Miami's offense moving forward. But Waddle, especially without Waller rest of season, still has such a high floor, and we see what he can do with that opportunity last week against the Falcons. So I think I'd prefer to keep Waddle with this team.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's more likely you'll find running backs off waivers than you will wide receivers, so that's something to keep in mind.
And he talks about depth. You only need short-term depth to plug in for buys since the entire team winning hinges on Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. And Bam Knight is a short-term option since the Cardinals thought so much about Michael Carter. They waived him on Monday, understanding no team is going to try to pick him up, and they'll just tack him back on. And so Bam Knight for the next couple of weeks till Trey Benson returns is easily a plug-and-play option.
It's so insulting. Like, we know no one's going to pick you up, so we're going to cut you, and then we're just going to bring you back.
I know.
It's like,
it's crazy.
It's so insulting. I almost forgot, as part of this trade, the Dolphins in week 16 are home against the Bengals. The Dolphins in week 17 are home against the Bucks. I mean, if Mike McDaniel and Tua and Waddle can survive and Achane can survive to get to that point, we're going to have huge projections on those guys in those two games. And they're going to stick out because there's going to be a lot of bad weather games. And Miami at home is just like so good in those late season spots. So, yeah. I understand what you're saying, Dave. But yeah, in spots like this too, like once we get past the buys, if you have JT and Barkley, like all you need is Tank Bigsby and DJ Giddens or Abdullah or whoever it is.
Yeah.
And like you don't need depth at running back at that point. All right, Jack. On one side, that's your DJ. He says, should I give up Ashton Genty and Brian Thomas Jr. for Bucky Irving? Context is full PPR. 2 flex league. He has CMC, Genty, Aaron Jones, Isaiah Davis, and Tootin. His wide receivers are Rice, Lamb, BTJ, and Franklin. I mean, we have this massively favoring Genty and BTJ. And I have talked before on here about how I was trying to get people to sell Genty, sell Judkins, guys like this on bad teams that don't have the clear pass down role. This is a lot to give up here for an uncertain Bucky, though. Jack, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, especially in a 2-flex league where you kind of need the bodies to start. I definitely prefer Genty and Brian Thomas. I mean, the Bucky stuff has not been great. Like, they ruled him out a week in advance the past 2 games. We don't have a timeline there. I mean, maybe this is fair, like, if we knew Bucky was going to be 100% full go after the bye. But even then, I think I'd still lean Genty and Brian Thomas, and with the Bucky uncertainty, it's definitely that side for me.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's an outlandish trade, but just to see the name values like Ashton Genty and Brian Thomas and how far they've fallen. Again, it's not incorrect. You also have to remember that Brian Thomas, Tim Patrick, and Dimey Brown all went into the bye with an injury for Jacksonville. So we have to see how they emerge.
Yep. All right. Last one here, Mark. Mr. Wyans. I don't know what that is. He says, what are your thoughts on trading away Dak and Spears for Caleb and Pearsall? My other running backs are JT, ETN, Tootin, Pacheco, and my wide receivers are Rice, Adunze, QJ, and Jalen Knoll. So on one side, we have Dak and Spears. On the other side, we have Caleb and Pearsall. We have Dak and Pearsall relatively close in value. We have Spears well ahead of Caleb here at this point, Mark. And so the trade in the calculator is going to favor that Dak Spears side by a decent amount. What do you think about this one?
I lean Dak and Spears and just holding on to those guys. I certainly prefer Dak over Caleb the rest of the season, given his full complement of weapons there in Dallas. And then Tyjae Spears is kind of ascending and made it close to a 50-50 split against Tony Pollard this past week. And we've seen some explosiveness there. Also, I think Ricky Pearsall, we could be on the more optimistic end of his rank right now in trade value, just given he's not yet back from that knee injury. And the Kyle Shanahan comments have been kind of ominous on just like he's not healing as fast as they thought. So just an uncertain timeline there. And then, yeah, Brandon Ayuk eventually coming back as well. So I'd lean holding on to Dak and Spears here. I don't think your wide receivers are bad enough to make like a desperation trade for Pearsall when he might not even play in week 9 anyway.
It sucks so much. I comped it on our call last night, having Ricky Pearsall to Tony Pollard, or every week I just look at my rosters and I'm like, well, I can't start you and I can't drop you. So here you are yet again, just sitting here.
Well, Spears is gaining on Pollard for sure.
Yeah.
Like for sure. So it's not great for either of them, obviously, in this situation, but it's really close between Spears and Pollard now, I think, in the usage stuff. So yeah, I like getting the Dak side of that one, clearly. All right. Oh, a couple scheduled things I just want to note before we get to moves to make. I mentioned it on the team by team with Silva, but Lions have 2 outdoor games coming up here next 2 weeks. Then they have 6 straight dome games going into the bye. So I really struggled with my moves to make this week. I thought about doing by JMO again. I feel like I'm like doing it every week. It's not ideal, but I just wanted to reiterate 6 straight dome games coming up to end the season for JMO. And then Bears schedule is not great. They play Cincy, but then I think Mark alluded to already, after they play Cincy, it's not as easy coming up here for the Bears. And if you wanted to sell Bears, like after this Cincy game would be the time to do it. All right. Let's get to our moves to make. Daigle, I will give you the floor for your first move to make ahead of week 9.
You mentioned the playoff schedule, and that's valid, but I am concerned about Chase Brown's workload right now. Through the first month of the season, he outtouched the rest of Cincy's backfield 68-12, and we just held our nose and said, this is a volume-based RB2. I can at least start and hope for the best. But now these last 3 games, although he's had better efficiency, he's only outtouched Samaje Perine 39-25 with Joe Flacco. It's a concern, especially because those games weren't even blowouts. So I am trying to sell Chase Brown, who is basically in a committee and getting by because of touchdown right now.
Yep. I think that makes sense, sadly. Mark, your first move to make ahead of week 9.
Sell Troy Franklin as my first move to make this week. We talked about how players coming off facing the Dallas Cowboys get, heralded treatment in the fantasy space. And I think now is the perfect time to sell. Troy Franklin had the league's easiest wide receiver matchup against Dallas and exploited it. And coming up, they play the Texans this week. Right now, we have Troy Franklin projected for under 10 PPR points per game, which is, not what people would expect. We have him ranked wide receiver 52 in the rest of season ranks. I've seen people out there claiming he's, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 the rest of the way. I kind of strongly disagree with that. The Broncos have 2 games left with the Chiefs coming up. So I think now is the perfect time to get out from underneath Troy Franklin. We know Sean Payton and the Broncos are going to spread the ball around, and I just don't feel good about his volume or matchups down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, Marvin Mims is in concussion protocol, and if he's out, that would certainly help Troy Franklin a decent amount. But yeah, I mean, this is a tough spot at the Texans here, and if you wanted to sell Troy Franklin, I think doing it before this game at Houston would certainly make sense. You'd be ignoring the shower narrative. Mark is showing no respect whatsoever to Bo Nix and Troy Franklin having extra chemistry from their time together bathing.
Go Ducks, baby.
Go Ducks. All right. Jack, your first move to make ahead of week 9.
Yeah, you mentioned selling Bears. I am going to do that, and I'm going to say sell DeAndre Swift. They play the Bengals this week. They play the Giants next week. They play the Steelers 4 weeks from now. So the schedule over the next month is not that bad, but after that, they get Eagles, Packers, Browns, Packers. I mean, that's pretty much as nightmarish of a schedule as you can possibly get. And I get the theory behind waiting a week before they play the Bengals. But Swift has scored a touchdown in 4 straight games. I don't want to bet on that continuing. I'd rather just get out now. He played under 50% of snaps this past week. He played 49%. Kyle Monangai played 46%. The Bears are playing Monangai on third down as well. They're using them pretty interchangeably in all situations. And Swift has kind of just coasted by on touchdown luck on an offense that I don't think projects to be very good moving forward. Adam tweeted today that Caleb ranks last in completion percentage over expectation. We've got Silva calling for Tyson Bagent. So I kind of like just getting out from DeAndre Swift, even with the positive matchups coming up over the next month.
Dude, can you imagine if you're like listening to 670 the score in Chicago and they're like, let's go to Evan from Wrigleyville. And it's just like Silva on there just being like, I think they should go to Tyson Bagent. It'd be so good. All right. My first move to make ahead. Oh, yeah, I was struggling, man. I went with kind of a layup here. And we may have done this one before. If so, I apologize. Buy Derrick Henry. And at the same time you buy Derrick Henry, add Keaton Mitchell. So where does Derrick Henry get most of his fantasy success? When Lamar Jackson is playing quarterback and holding linebackers in those RPOs, when the Ravens have a lot of red zone opportunities, when the Ravens are controlling the scoreboard of games. Well, I have good news for all those scenarios. Lamar Jackson is back, healthy, apparently, and this is their schedule. Week 9, they face Tua Tagovailoa. Week 10, J.J. McCarthy. Week 11, Dylan Gabriel. 12, Justin Fields. 13, Joe Flacco. 14, Aaron Rodgers. 15, Joe Flacco. 16, Drake May, okay. 17, Jordan Love, okay. 18, Aaron Rodgers. And so there are going to be a lot of opportunities for Derrick Henry and this Ravens team to score touchdowns the rest of the way. And if you do that, adding Keaton Mitchell, who I think the direct backup to Derrick Henry is Keaton Mitchell. And if Derrick Henry were to go down, my God, I'm blanking on the passing back. Justice Hill will stay in his passing back role, and Keaton Mitchell will be the one actually handling much of the base work that Derrick Henry was handling. So, I think Keaton Mitchell is a good one injury away guy. Buy Derrick Henry, add Keaton Mitchell, for me, is my first move. Daigle, your second move ahead of week 9.
I am oddly and not planned also adding a Raven, because right now a lot of people I know are dealing with tight end bye weeks, and the streaming options include Theo Johnson, but not too many strong options. I think Isaiah Likely is still out there in the majority of leagues. And so I'm just going to get it out of the way early. And Likely ran more routes than Mark Andrews in their last 2 games since Likely returned. The Ravens have a healthy 29-point team total on Thursday and face the Dolphins, who are number 6 in our points allowed above expectations in our DVP tool. So I'm plugging in for Dallas Goedert, Harold Fan, the list goes on immediately, and starting Isaiah Likely this week.
2 things, Daigle. First,
not in the 150?
This is the rest of season top 150 show, and he is not in the rest of season top 150.
That's okay.
And second,
neither is Keaton Mitchell, Adam.
Neither is Keaton Mitchell, but that was a sidecar move. And second, I actually played Isaiah Likely in the 1K on DraftKings on Sunday at 0.6% ownership. I didn't win any money, but I got my GPP bro gold star. So that was good and fun. But yes, Isaiah Likely does have his nose in front of Mark Andrews for routes, at least for now.
With Lamar back, I promise you, he will not be 0.6% owned on Thursday.
Yes. Okay. Who are we up to here? Mark, your second move to make here ahead of week 9.
Yeah, let's go with buy Drake London this week. And I think now is a good buy low opportunity on the Falcons in general. And London is my favorite target here. He is coming off of a hip injury, but it sounds like Drake London is expected to practice this week and that Michael Penix will be back at quarterback. All signs pointing up there for London. And in this Falcons team, we've seen their offense pretty much only have success when they're feeding Drake London and Bijan Robinson the ball. So I think that is going to be the plan down the stretch here. They're also past their bye, so you get that little tiebreaker in favor of London and the Falcons here. Their schedule is just awesome down the stretch too in terms of fantasy matchups. They have games against the Colts, Panthers, Saints, Jets left in the regular season, and then the fantasy playoffs they get the Bucks, Cardinals, and Rams. The Falcons defense has been playing well, but they did lose Divine Diablo to IR, who was one of their stud linebackers. And then we saw the Dolphins kind of dissect them in their first game without Diablo. So I think we could see some regression here from the Falcons defense. And I love their schedule coming up by Drake London for me.
All right. I like it. By Drake London. Jack, your second and final move to make.
Yeah, I struggled to think of a second one, and I don't think this is like a slam dunk, but I'm gonna say, yeah, riveting start. But I'm gonna say by Khalil Shakir. Josh Allen has thrown for 180 and 163 yards over the past 2 games. The 180 was against Atlanta, who just shut them down. 163 last week against Carolina, where they just ran the entire game. I think we can definitely expect those numbers to climb in coming weeks. And over the next 6 games, the Bills have 1 game against the Texans, but besides that, it's Chiefs, Dolphins, Buccaneers, Steelers, and Bengals. But I think all of those games project either as a shootout or just playing a bad defense. And the Keon Coleman experiment kind of seems like it hasn't worked out the way the Bills hoped, and I think Shakir is Josh's most trusted wide receiver. He has a 26% target share over the past 4 games. So I think that with the Bills trying to get the passing game going and with a pretty friendly schedule the next month and a half, except for the Houston game, I think we can expect to see Shakir get going a bit.
All right. Yes. Khalil Shakir, like catch the ball 4 yards away from Josh Allen and run as fast as you can. Like that's today's NFL, man. I honestly don't hate it. And like that role is like one that I try to get for sure on my fantasy teams. Okay. My final move to make, sell Travis Kelce. I mean, this guy just shoves it down my throat on Monday Night Football. Everybody's watching. Everybody is watching. They're like, oh my God, he's back. Travis Kelce still has got it. I don't know. I mean, I still believe that Rashee Rice taking those short routes, taking those goal line hitches, take those like goal line trick plays and screens. I think all that's going to Rashee Rice, and that's bad, obviously, for Travis Kelce. Also, those short area targets are bad. Like he was winning like deep down the field against that Commander's zone. I don't know how sustainable that is when he is 36. Also, this team has Super Bowl aspirations. Easing off Kelce during the fantasy playoffs to get him ready for the NFL playoffs is definitely in play. And in the rest of season top 150, people might be somewhat surprised. You know, we have Fannin ahead. We have Kyle Pitts ahead. We have Goddard. We have Gadsden ahead of Travis Kelce. And yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. So I like getting out from Travis Kelce now if you can. And if you think like you have something with Travis Kelce now, you can start him every week. I would continue to grind waivers and streamers on at the tight end position rather than just be like, yep, I got it with Kelce, and we're just going to ride with that. All right. That is going to do it for another edition of the rest of season Top 150 show. Before you X out of here, be sure to hit subscribe on our YouTube channel. It is indeed totally free and helps us to continue to bring you free shows like this. For Jack, for Daigle, for Mark, for producer Ryan, for producer Luke, for everyone behind the scenes at ETR, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.